Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It Wednesday, and on our special installment of Let's Talk About It Wednesday. And today we have my friend, we have a colleague. She's an amazing person. She is an expert in CCBT. For you guys who do not know what that is canine cognitive behavior therapy. She is an expert. She is the one who wrote the book on these things, man. And if you follow her, you guys know what I'm talking about. And if you don't follow her, I'm thinking that you should, right? Yeah, she teaches animals, right? Yeah, and she teaches humans how to interact with those animals. She's the one and only, my friend, Billie Groom.
Hey, Tony. Thanks so much. Awesome to
You're
see you
welcome.
again. Always fun.
Yes. Always fun. I've had you on the podcast. We talked about this. You've been in the conference. So it's you're an amazing individual, right? And watching what you do always inspires me because you make me feel like that I'm not working hard enough.
The same thing to you. Ditto with everything you've been doing. Well, we just keep each other motivated, right? And everyone
This
else
is
out
very
there is
true.
doing a whole bunch of great things as well. I can't believe
Yeah.
your show has such great people on it. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
And the honor is mine as well. So I appreciate that. So I want to let's talk about it Wednesday. It's your topic. What would you like to discuss today?
There's just so many topics. I've listening to your shows, a lot of people kind of go back and talk about their journey. I could do that. I could talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. I could talk about dogs and animals and humans. And there's so many different topics, especially when it comes. I love the way that you make grief a, such an all encompassing. So it's such a large, broad, and you really dive into so many different aspects of it and you allow people to do that. So I think for me, I I discovered why I do what I do and what I do and how I do it and why I do it as an adult. I actually went through my entire career, my career path, without really even understanding fully why I do what I do based on a childhood trauma situation. And I only learned of that situation. Well, I knew of the situation all along, but I learned more about it at the beginning of 2020. So I thought maybe I'd just start with sharing that situation because it sort of was like the light bulb goes on and it just sends you down a whole different path, which I think a lot of people listening to this can relate to, where there's just that moment that just changes everything. And there's somebody at my front door.
But that's okay. That's okay.
I believe it. There's somebody at my front door. I apologize, people. Punch
No
out.
worries.
Sorry.
No
I'm just
worries.
trying to get him to.
Okay, yeah.
Come on. Good boy. Good boy. There we go. Sorry, people. There was a package delivery. I don't know why. So
Gotta love the package deliveries.
he's the quietest dog until somebody barks at my door, and I actually am pretty okay with that. And I have 3 other dogs here who decide that it really doesn't matter that there's somebody banging down my door. They all have their different personalities, don't they? Here's the other one coming to see what's going on. So I in the early 2020, I got a phone call in January 2020. I got a phone call just in the middle of a day, I just thought it was going to be a client, truthfully. And this man started out by asking me if my name from birth was Leslie and if I was born in a place in Ontario, Canada. And I was. I don't hide that, but not a lot of people know it.
Mhm.
And he said that he name dropped some people that he knew that I knew from there that I'm quite close to, essentially, in an interesting way. And he said that he was their same age, which put him 10 years older than myself. And I'm in my late 50s now. So he asked me if he said that he found me on LinkedIn, which I had become more active on LinkedIn at that time. So it made sense. And he asked if he could tell me a story about my childhood. I had no idea where he was going with this. And so I said, sure, why not? And he said that when I was 7 and he was 17, he had a family pet. He lived near me, around the corner. And he had a family dog that was just a great family dog named Flash. And he just, for one weird reason, I don't know why, he took off from home. And he just kind of took himself on a little adventure around our small town. It was a really safe small town. Anyway, my parents ended up finding him and bringing him in. And of course, back then there's not social media. So it was all word of mouth got around that my parents had this dog and they were looking for the people. So they probably had the dog, I don't know, maybe a night or two. And so he came over to get his dog and that all went well. And he really, really respected my parents. He ended up staying for at least an hour, chatting with them, talking. He doesn't really remember seeing me. I was a very shy girl. I'm still shy in a different way. But the fact I didn't come out is probably, I can believe that. And so he really, really enjoyed his time with my parents. He took Flash, he left. And then the following night, my parents were killed by a drunk driver. And it really affected him. But the point of him calling me was to let me know that shortly after that, maybe a couple months, he saw me in the schoolyard and he was playing football with his friends. And I was just walking through the schoolyard by myself. And he didn't say anything. He didn't come up. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to talk to me. And he's always felt very guilty about that and very bad. And he just wanted to tell me that when he saw me on LinkedIn and what I do with dogs and how I work with dogs and how I view animals and communication and being able to relate and to bring them into I should say I work exclusively with dogs over 6 months of age and a lot of ones that have had challenging pasts, and I help people bring them into their homes and be able to communicate and relate to them. And it was only later in life that I understood that my method adhered to cognitive behavioral therapy. So hearing, this man's name is Peter, hearing his story really put a lot of pieces together for me, because my family relationship was great, but prior to 7, they were a very, very great family. We were a great family. And after that, I mean, it wasn't horrible. I wasn't, it wasn't horrible, but there was very lack of understanding and communication and recognizing who I am. It was very generic, for lack of a better word, and very teaching right from wrong. And the parenting style was more just about parenting, boom, 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 not about understanding and nurturing and inspiring and understanding emotional intelligence. So the way I ended up, whether I gravitated to dogs because of his dog, I don't know. I still don't really know. But I know that his story helped me understand that it's important for people to feel as though they have the skills and tools to relate to people or animals. I guess for some reason I took it over to dogs, when they are in a challenging situation or when they're grieving or when they're going through a process. People want to be able to help people, and they want to be able, even if it's just in that moment, it doesn't have to be a long-term help, but just even in that moment. And Peter's recognition that he just didn't have the skill, and he has very, very high expectations of himself. He's very successful in his career and in his personal, and I mean, we all have shit that goes on, but not everything worked out perfectly for him, but his self expectations are high. And I think that really bothered him, that he didn't know how to do that and how to address it and how to communicate with somebody in that situation. And that allowed me to realize that that's really what my goal has been with working with pet parents, to teach them skills and to provide them with the skills to be able to bring in these dogs from challenging pasts into their home and bring them into their family and make them feel part of the family and make them feel that we understand, let them know that we understand what's important to them and how to communicate with them.
I love that. I definitely love that. And we've talked about this, in some aspects and very in depth with it as well, right? But you have a way with animals when it comes down to understanding how to help people maneuver those challenging moments these dogs go through, right? And we've talked about it, how humans, people, how it can be applied to people. But you use this very special technique about understanding how dogs move and think, and you figured out how to go, well, this dog has a troubling past. Maybe it was a pit bull that's been fought or something, right? Have aggressive behavior. And you've managed to go in there and go, that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen the work that you do with helping rescue these animals out of these kill shelters and getting them into beautiful homes. And you see the pictures. Like I saw the picture of one of your clients posting the dog up there with the big old smile on there, and I thought I read the caption of, you wouldn't believe where she came from, right? The past. So explain that a little bit, because I'm always curious. I'm always a student of learning and things like that. When a dog has a troubled past, that in most cases would be put down, how do you go in there and help people understand that, that although just like humans, it has a troubled past, but that doesn't define the dog?
It doesn't define the dog. I love that. It does not define the dog. They are extremely resilient. And I think just having them know that somebody gets what's in their brain. And cognitive behavioral therapy is all about emotions and thought patterns, cognitive skills. A lot of them have used cognitive skills to stay alive. So we need to harness those. And by that, I just mean the ability to process, think, decision making, that they have learned behavior, which people automatically think is horrible. But if you think about people, what they learned from trauma, and they've gone through certain situations, they've managed to stay alive and so that, we all learn from terrible mistakes or we learn from situations, somewhat so, but we also learn skills of how to manage ourselves and how to manage ourselves in different environments and surroundings. And we need to recognize that they have the skills to do that. So when I started working with dogs over 3 decades ago, I brought in these dogs and I never studied dog training. I never intended to be a canine behaviorist. I never intended to do it as a career, never mind. I guess probably volunteer. I probably thought I would. And that's what I did voluntarily. Brought in hundreds of dogs over a decade and worked with them. So I learned my method from working with these dogs. Which is why it's a different method. Had I studied dog training or had an interest in studying dog training, I would have just used the same method that everybody does, which works. It's a fine method. It's called conditioning. And so it is intended to teach behaviors and instill good thought patterns. So with dogs, we would call that socialization, teaching right from wrong, basic commands, rewarding. It's based on a reward system, the traditional dog training method. Uses rewards to teach right behavior. Cognitive behavioral therapy takes an approach that there's no right or wrong behavior. They're doing behaviors because they feel they need to do that behavior to stay alive. Or their brain automatically goes into a state of panic when they are put in a situation or see, and people do it too. We also talk a lot about cognitive dissonance. So, and I'll talk to my clients about it, which is perception. Essentially, does what your perception should happen in an area or in a surrounding, does that, match or jive with what actually is happening? So just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean that you dislike everything there. And the common example I use is, if we were to walk into a bar and everybody's dancing around and, rooting it up and loud music and everything going on, we'd be fine with it because it's a bar. It's what we expect. But if we go into a library and that same thing is happening, we possibly could be uncomfortable or scared, or we're going to react based on our emotions and what our perception is of what should be happening there. And then we're going to make decisions based on that. And our ability to make decisions that are more socially acceptable, like leaving or asking what's going on, to follow down your road, there might be a movie shoot going on in there, right? And right, we don't know that. But once somebody tells us it's actually a movie shoot, we're instantly more comfortable. Oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I didn't get the memo, right?
Yes.
So these are what we have to. So cognitive behavioral therapy just takes a completely different approach than regular dog training, and they're both evidence-based. They're both used with humans as well successfully. But the goal of each of those approaches is different. One is, like I said, conditioning is more to teach right from wrong and to encourage expected behavior and to encourage good thought patterns, whereas cognitive behavioral therapy recognizes that those thought patterns are already there. We're not intending to change the thought patterns. Counter conditioning is another method. It's under the conditioning realm. It uses associative elements and repetition to change thought patterns. So you would associate positives with negatives so that it changes your perception. With dogs, the way they would do that is, if a dog is fearful of people on a bicycle, they would use treats while bicycles are going by, while people are riding by on a bicycle, to associate so that they're associating a positive, keep the brain from going into a panic state. And it can work. It can work with, it definitely works with humans. And then over repetition, desensitization, they get desensitized to bicycles. Cognitive behavioral therapy takes a totally different approach, where we practice the brain resetting and managing our thought patterns. And I think that's why it's often used for grief and for trauma, because it really starts with our emotions and being able to recognize when our brain is about to go into a panic state, or when we're about to feel emotions that cause us to do multiple different things. Might lead to an eating disorder, or it might lead to aggression, or a meltdown, or all sorts of different things. And so we need to first and foremost be able to practice our brain being comfortable with change in routine. And that's what I do with dogs. I'd be able to reset their brain, allow them to make different decisions, allow them to have different choices based on their brain being able to process.
I got a question, because there's a lot of I think, and I'm gonna say this, a lot of misconception about how long dogs retain memory, right? You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Because and the reason being, you may go into a house, dog does something, get scolded for it. No, 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 right? And they go off, and 5 minutes later, they're coming back as if nothing has happened, right? You know what I'm saying? And you're like, they just forgot all about it. I'm like, well, like maybe that dog got an attitude with you, or maybe, what I'm saying, he just don't care about what you just said.
Yeah.
So now that's my first question. I think that's honestly, talking with you, listening to what you're saying, you're pretty much, throwing that myth out the window, saying, no, dogs do remember.
Mm.
They just tend to their brains tend to take them somewhere else. And they do other things, making other decisions and things like that. Now, with that being said, I have also been in situations when I was younger where I've seen dogs go after people that I've never met before. But these dogs have been rescued or something like that. And, they see this individual, see something that symbolizes this individual, and automatically they're triggered,
Mm-hmm.
and you be around these dogs for a month. So it's kind of like, are they remembering what had happened to them? And they're just like, hey, no, I'm going to get you. Or are they going, are they just forgetting in those moments? So
it's a really good, this is a great conversation. And because it really does depend, just like people, it depends on the dog, why they're doing a behavior. And this is really important because common dog training focuses on the behavior, but focusing on the reason for the behavior. And when I say reason, I'm not necessarily referring to something like, well, the dog was abused or the dog was a fighting dog, but the reason in that moment. So is the dog dislike that person, or does the dog feel like that person in that moment is going to do something that they're uncomfortable with? So these are two very different things. So you can get a dog that likes a person, but if they feel that person is going to take away their bone, they still like the person. They just don't like what the person is doing in that moment. So that's their ability to, that's a cognitive skill where they're processing through what they think that person might do, and they're doing a behavior to prevent that. So we're going to work that dog has the ability to process and is processing and is making decisions to prevent behavior, and the way that they're choosing to do that is unacceptable to most people, because they don't want to get bit because they walk by their dog when their dog's chewing a bone. Right. So how we're going to address that, getting the brain to make different decisions, think, okay, I don't necessarily have to lunge at this person to keep them away. They don't want my bone. But the dog has to be able to stop and process and make that decision on his own, as opposed to being told it's wrong. Or taking the bone and saying, I'm going to take this frickin' bone. Don't do that. That's going to heighten the behavior. But on the same note, we can't spend our life tiptoeing around our dog. And what if we do want to get the bone away? What if we need to leave for work and we don't want the dog with the bone? So we need to be able to accomplish all these without the dog feeling like they need to snap and lunge at us. So first and foremost, we don't even work in that environment. We build a bond and change the dog's perception in other areas that are easier and smaller, that allow us to do things that the dog kind of wouldn't expect us to do. Might be a little bit out of the norm. Builds trust, builds communication, a bond, allows the dog's brain to sort of think, we're not doing anything horrible or mean. We're just changing routines and changing things that he thinks should happen. Mm-hmm. Because that dog is processing and then go, I'm going to do this, and that's going to work in my favor. So we're literally working with the brain. We don't work in, so other methods would work in the moment with the bone, which is called resource guarding or possession aggression. And other dog trainers would work in that moment to decide, how do I get the bone, or how do I stop the dog from lunging? Cognitive behavioral therapy doesn't work that way. It works totally in other situations. And then when we have skills and tools we can use when the dog has the bone to prevent that behavior by choice. The dog just chooses to not do that behavior. It's very odd method for people to understand, because it's literally the brain changing at the pace of the brain, and the exercises get the brain to do that. That's how it works with people. So what I do follows the exact same formula that it follows with people. It's just done differently because, for example, we can't tell a dog to take 3 deep breaths or to journal.
Very true. Very true.
So I have techniques that are proven to get the dog to stop and process and to make different decisions. Other dogs aren't processing. The problem is they don't process. They just react. They're just, I see something and boom, I'm reacting. I'm not even, like, think of a teenager, right? Just think of a teenager that they know right from wrong. They know their parents are telling them not to do that, and they know it's wrong to do a certain behavior, but damn, it's going to be really fun. Or they feel they need to do it, or they want to do it. And so boom, they're just no thought, just boop, doing it.
Yeah.
So what we would do is different exercises. For that case, we do exercises where we're inducing processing, allowing that dog to stop and think and process. So some dogs, just like people, they're just the reason why they're doing a behavior. And it could even be the same people in different situations. But commonly, statistically speaking, people and dogs are the type that either are challenged in processing, and so we need to induce processing, or they're challenged in making good decisions. And so we use exercises that make good decisions. And that's different than choices. And I should say that. So for those of you out there who have dogs and know canine enrichment, those provide options. So options are different than inducing decision making. So when you're providing options, that's more of what you would do with a 3-year-old human, where they start turning 4, and you're sort of giving them, when they're 3, you're more teaching them just to be, that people are happy and people are good and going places and doing things, and you're parenting. And then when they get 4, you start of, well, you can wear this to school, or you can wear that to school, or would you like to have an apple, or would you like to have a banana? So that's canine enrichment for dogs. It's providing good options, and they really don't have a bad option. Any option that they're provided with is good. Decision making is different. We're not encouraging anything. They're not provided with what they have to choose. We're practicing the brain being able to stop and process and make decisions. And what they realize is that they don't have to feel fear. They don't have to panic. They don't have to react. And this, getting back to grief, is what we do with people when they're overcoming fears or anxieties or grief or memory. Memory is a big thing. I mean, it's great that you brought that up, Tony. Memory is hard. If we remember something and it triggers something, that can be extremely challenging. It could be a smell. It could be a sound.
Yeah.
And when that becomes triggered in our brain, sometimes we don't even know it. It's just pops there. And then we react. We have to have some sort of tools and skills to be able to manage that, especially if we're in public. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's more your line of expertise, whether people are alone or in public. But With a dog, probably more so.
I think it's, it applies in all areas, because listening to how you help the dogs understand, and helping them slow down to process the situation, right? It's the same thing when we talk about humans going through grief and things like that. And let me know if I'm on the right path. But I'm understanding, because the same concept applies: reaction versus response, right? In some situations, like even with human beings, when we carrying grief, or going through an episode, um, maybe someone says something that triggers you emotionally. We get wrapped up into the emotion, and instead of slowing down to respond to the situation, we react. And that reaction is sometimes in a negative way, because we don't take the time to go, oh, maybe it's not that sort of situation, right? It's an emotional response, because the brain is saying, hey, I need to defend myself. So it's a reaction to it. Now, when we step in, and it sounds like you do the same thing in both cases, in canines and with humans, and when you step in that situation, you go, hey, no, slow it down. Let's think about this for a minute. Instead of reacting, let's clear your brain so you can respond in a more suitable way. And the reason why I say it, because not always that we respond is suitable for someone who may be perceiving. It's towards the individual in that situation, right? Which now, and so I want to get your thoughts about that, but also, I love the fact that you're mentioning grief, because we see so many videos. Like, I just watched a video not too long ago where it was a German Shepherd. The owner had passed away, and they were holding the dog, and the dog broke loose and went and laid on top of this graveyard, and it's weeping, right? It's crying and everything. And then it shows a video. The family member takes the dog home, and the dog, for a couple of weeks, is sitting on the couch, laying in the windowsill, weeping, looking out, waiting for the owner to come back home. So, and I think that's pretty interesting, because it poses the question: do dogs grieve? Right? And if so, how do they understand from that perception of that loss? Right? Because when we think about, okay, so, and the reason why I say that, when you go to a shelter, when somebody comes in and removes a dog from a home, they take the dog to the shelter. Someone else comes in, gets the dog, renames the dog, and that dog is with that family now, right? It's as if they had no past with someone else. So, and I find that kind of interesting. So I just want to get your perception along that, the response versus reaction, and also, how do dogs understand the grief process, and if so, what does that process look like, right? Because in human beings, we can sum it up in words, but in your case, I think you can sum it up in behaviors.
Yeah, there's a couple things going on here. One, to get back to response and reaction. Wow, that's a big topic right now for sure, because there's a lot of sensitive topics in the world right now in general. And it takes a lot for people to step back and say, was that personal against me? Is that a reflection of that person, or was that, it had nothing to do with me, the person just said it or did it and it wasn't personal? Being able to put it into context, execution, as opposed to just simply the impact, the personal impact that it had, but putting it into context. So yes, with dogs, they can do the same thing. Their perception, like people, their perception is their reality.
Okay.
They may not like the situation they're in, just like us, or we may not like a person in a situation we're in. We don't, I think that the biggest difference with CBT versus traditional dog training methods is that we're not trying to change that dog's perception of that person, but simply change the perception of their need to react in a, they still may, it's like if you go to a dinner party, you still may leave that dinner party not liking someone, but your intention wasn't to go there to like them. You just wanted to be able to go and still have a good time and be okay and not be, not be affected by that person, but you still leave not liking them. Traditional dog training methods focus on trying to get the dog to change the perception of that person. So the goal of different, and sometimes it depends on the people and their situation. Other times they do want to like a person and they do want to understand a person and they do want to understand where that person's coming from and what they're doing and to be able to like that person. So it really depends on what the goal is. And often that, when it comes to working with dogs, I'm working with the people who have the dogs. So it depends a little bit on what their goal as well. But often people will say to me, I don't really care whether my dog likes it. Like this dog is actually from the streets of Mexico. Not my dog, but the person who has that dog lives here. But that person is good with that dog not liking everybody and being protective of the home, as you can see.
Yes.
As the other dogs are more under my care, and well, one's just a little puppy, hence the crate. I pulled him right off the reserve recently. So he came from a reserve in Northern Canada, and he's him and his sister, very different personalities. How they view the world, how they see the world, how they react, how they choose to react is very different, even though they were born into the same ditch from the same mom, but probably the same dad or dads. Dogs can do that, multiple dads. But they're very different in how they perceive their environment and how they react to it. So I digress there a little bit, but I think that just shows that it's important, the many influences, goals, influence of the people around us and our surroundings and our perception of those all comes into play with our personality and our goals. So yes, when we adopt a dog from a shelter, we do give them a new name, possibly. Can that dog understand that concept? Yes. A dog can understand that this person calls me Jackson and this person calls me Fred. They can absolutely understand that. They have cognitive skills, so they can understand, and memory. These are all cognition. So they can understand the concept of a home. Even if they've come straight from the street into a shelter and then into a home, it doesn't take them long to understand the concept of a home. Often they will be very easy to house train because they've never messed in a home, and that concept would be odd. Not every dog that comes in. Some are challenging to house train. But that's something I address all the time. And actually my method works very well for that. But again, the reason would be, is it because the dog doesn't know it's wrong to go in the home, or the dog doesn't know how to get the person to let him out? Or the dog isn't bonded enough with the person to trust that person will be able to figure out what they want. And a lot of that is decided on where the dog messes. So I'm digressing here a little bit, but where I'm going with this is it's important to understand what they know and don't know. It would be like switching jobs, switching companies, but staying in the same profession. So you still know your profession. You're still very good at it. You're good at your job. You've been good at your job for 20 years. You change companies. If they treat you like you don't know anything, you're going to question why they're not harnessing your skills and using your skills and respecting what you know. On the same note, if they let you just do your own thing, decompress, not give you any direction or guidance, they're setting you up to fail a little bit, because you know your job and you know your profession, but you don't know how their company works.
Right. Yeah.
You need to know what their company's expectations are that were different from your previous company's expectations, or how they run things on a daily basis, or how it functions. Right? They need to be given the skills and that information, and it needs to be given to them clearly. They're not, they can learn it just like dogs. If it's calm and clear and you create a communication and a bond, they don't care. They just need to know who to go to find out this information and what the information is. It needs to be very calm and clear, so they can go into multiple different situations. If we sit back and not give them any guidance or direction, that can be challenging.
They're left to their own thought process of how, and tend to assume this is what you want, right? Because that's what they've done. If it's as if muscle memory, right? It's muscle memory / brain memory, right? I know what I did over here, but since you're not giving me any sort of clear direction or guidance or instructions, then I have to assume that you want me to do it like I did it over here, until I do something to displease you, but I'm confused because you never given me anything. That makes a lot of sense.
You're right. That's a very good point. So if you wait around for the wrong behavior to happen and then indicate through a reaction that behavior was wrong, it can be very confusing to a dog, because in their mind, it's what they've always done and it's right. So what they think is that you don't understand them. You don't understand the situation. An example would be leash reactivity to a dog. So they've always learned on the street that if they lunge and bark at a dog, that dog will stay away. Works well.
Yeah.
And now you're telling them they can't do that? No. You don't understand. This has worked for me. I lunge and bark. So if humans are constantly reacting, telling them it's wrong, they're going to butt heads. But if we teach the skills in different areas, in the home, during playtime, and we teach skills where we can use their ability to focus on that dog, to process different actions happening, and be able to process that and realize, okay, I actually don't need to bark and lunge in order to keep that dog away. In an urban environment, probably that dog's not going to come up. Probably that dog is on a leash attached to another person walking down the street. So that dog's not going to come running up. But until that dog can stop and process and realize that he doesn't need to lunge and bark in order for that to happen. But we're not telling him he has to like the dog. And we're not telling him he has to be okay with the dog coming up to him. We're just showing him that he doesn't have to lunge and bark to achieve the same goal. But if we can't get his brain to stop and process that for himself, we can't just be giving him treats and telling him, it's okay, you don't need to, that dog's fine, it's okay, here's some treats, and distract him and pull him away, or it's no. We need to practice the brain being able to process in other situations and then apply that so he can realize, interesting. In this new world I'm in, I don't need to do that behavior, and the same thing happens. Okay. And then we can praise them or not praise them. They're doing it. It's an intrinsic reward. Their brain doesn't go to a panic state. Their brain doesn't react. And I think human nature, we're going to praise the dog and be happy about it. But
Right.
the nature of CBT is that it's an intrinsic reward. It's just natural, and not having to panic or feel fear is a place that we like our brain to go. And once we start practicing going there and doing that, it becomes what we choose to do.
I get that. I definitely, you broke that down, and I'm going, wow, that's the same, right? Because when a person is in a place of uncomfortability, right, or a place of vulnerability, our first instinct is to go into survival mode. Now, this also, makes me think about the hierarchy when it comes down to people and animals. It's pretty much the same across the board, right? So when a dog is coming, when an animal comes into the home, and you have other animals, there's a certain pecking order. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, or and just let me know. But when a new dog is entered into that home, even as a puppy, it is looking trying to figure out its place.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the oldest one, the one who's been there the most, is going to be the more calm, the more docile, the more dominant one. But you'll never know, because that dog understands that the human, whichever human is there, is the alpha, and he's second in command, and everyone else needs to fall into place until it's time for them to take their place. So that makes sense to me, right?
I think it's where you're going a little bit with this is, again, getting back to the ability to process an environment.
Mm-hmm.
So when we feel as though the leader of that environment has the ability to calmly manage situations, and that everybody in that environment respects the dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes us feel comfortable. So if we go somewhere where we feel as though there's just chaos about to happen, the horses are running free from the barn and there's no ability to reel them in, we all get a bit uncomfortable, and we're all just going into self-protection mode, because it's like there's no calm manageability here. But when we see that it would just be like different teachers have different, you can just tell a classroom where the teacher or the leader has that ability to just bring that calm comfort to everybody. You're right. The new people are going to look around. Okay, so this is what we do. This is
right.
And the ones that have been there a long time are going to expect these other ones to pick up on it at some point. Maybe not right away, but they're going to expect that leader to teach those other ones what happens in this environment. So you'll get dogs if the human doesn't have the ability to calmly manage the situation, bring in these dogs and not have it be smooth every second of every day, but overall have the skills to bring in that dog into the home and not be getting mad and frustrated and angry and constantly correcting the dog, and the dog being frustrated and upset and not knowing where their place is and what they're supposed to do. And it's just chaos. All the other dogs, it's going to disrupt that's the whole point on positive leadership, right? And the whole point on being able to calmly manage situations. And that's what I teach humans to do. So right off the get-go, when a new dog comes in, they have skills and tools that are very simple and very easy, that allow the other dogs to see that new dog is bonding with the human. So those other dogs can just kind of hang back a little bit. We don't have to manage this new dog or situations, because our human has this under control. And that's comforting. That's comforting for everybody. And that's what decreases aggression and division and, mutiny on the bounty and all that kind of stuff.
I love that you said that, the mutiny.
Yeah, like we need, so alpha is an interesting term, but it's long as it's positive and respectful. But when I first started out, you're right, I lived in a home that was extremely tiny, 450 square feet. Well, that's pretty tiny for having 10 or 12 dogs, sometimes up to 18. And I had neighbors. I had a very small yard. I had a shared driveway. I was in a urban area. Wasn't exactly legal, but that's a whole other topic. My dogs are tied to your doorstep. It's just what you do.
Sorry about
that. We won't go down that road. But that's exactly. You had to have that. I learned. That's how I learned what I do. That's how I learned what I know, because you need to be able to be calm and we're not going to be perfect. We're not always going to say the right thing and do the right thing, but perception is important, and being able to take that and process it, how we react.
Yeah. And I love that you're bringing that part up, perception and reality, because I just got done talking with someone about this, especially when it comes down to men. That's kind of like my jam thing, talking about men understanding and helping others understand perception versus reality. Maybe what you're seeing is not the reality of what's actually going on. So let's break it down. Perception. What are you seeing? You're seeing the behavior. You're seeing the reactivity of what's going on in reality, the homelessness, the addiction, the aggression, the loneliness, all of the frustration, the irritability, all of these different things that play along in the reality. That's perception. This is what you're seeing. So your perception is now this reality, which is now can be misconstrued of what's actually going on. Understood. I definitely understand that, because
I love what you do. I think it's very important for people to, and it's hard. It's hard when we have emotions and we have feelings and we've been in situations and we have learned experiences. Dogs have learned experiences. Again, that's all cognition, right?
Right.
Processing the environment and being able to put it into perspective and to step aside and say, am I letting my previous experiences influence this one negatively? And to be able to understand where someone else is coming from when they say or do something. And maybe it wasn't personal, or it wasn't, but it's hard when we're grieving, or when we're upset, or when we're in a challenging situation. It can be challenging to do that. Like I said, I was 7 at the time, and then growing up through that, I think to be able to understand that there were other adults in the situation that were also affected by my parents' sudden death.
Right.
So they're going through that and no one's an expert on that. Well, no one, you are, but nobody in that realm that I was in, and nobody expected it. So, and then you're right. People turn to alcohol and they turn to drugs, and then it's even more challenging to process.
But it's not that it's challenging, right? Again, like you said, the concept is understanding what you're seeing, because for the individual who's going through it, just like, and I have to think, like dogs would do the same thing. They're just trying to survive these challenging moments that are going on in their life. So the response is out the window. It's more of I need to react. I need to keep myself safe. I need to survive in order to make it. And that, and it brings up something that I saw, or I was watching National Geographic, and they were talking about the wild dogs of Africa, right? And I think this is a great concept when you think about it, because then we think about domesticated dogs as well, the survival instinct. The domesticated dogs or the wild dogs in Africa are just dogs, right? And they go out there and they're out there with the lions, they're out there with the crocodiles and hippos, all of these different apex predators
Yeah.
that if given any moment,
Yeah.
these dogs will be a meal.
Yeah.
They've learned how to hunt. They've learned how to adapt to the situation. They've learned how to create a pack mentality and a community and a way to communicate to keep themselves safe from the predators, right? And so so when we think about human beings, there's really, there's slight differences, but it's cut and dry across the board, right?
I love
So
what you're saying. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I mean, I'm just saying this because it's, if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected, right? But I want to.
I love this is a
You're an expert on this.
well, no, you are with people. It's the exact same thing. I love what you're saying, because if we have a guy who survived as a young child in a very dangerous neighborhood and became a drug dealer and survived and learned all these skills, we have to recognize those skills. We don't have to agree with all of them or like them.
Mm-hmm.
But they've learned skills. They've used their cognitive skills to stay alive,
Mm-hmm.
to make decisions. They were making good decisions for the environment they were in, which is why they're alive.
Yes.
Do we agree with those decisions or that lifestyle? Doesn't matter. It makes no difference. Same with dogs. So when dogs have been living in the environment that you just were speaking of, as well as, this one's a street dog from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much his personality. I can walk through Home Depot or an airport with him. Doesn't matter. He's got it because he comes from very busy streets of Mexico. Lots going on, lots of stuff. He can round up that situation in a heartbeat. He knows exactly who's doing what and what they're doing and where everything is. But one person knocks on the door. That's odd. That's weird. That's different. Nobody ever comes here. I have no friends. I have friends. I see them on patios. But so when something's weird or different, but what we do is we take those skills that they have and what they've learned, and we harness those. And we, instead of thinking them as bad behavior or as bad skills, what have they learned? What do they know? How can we harness those and recognize them? And that's what CBT does. It allows us to learn what they know and take what they know and feed off of it, instead of saying exactly what you said about the shelter dogs. Instead of saying, you know nothing, you've had no past, you're now new to this home and I'm teaching you everything new. Isn't it more respectful and make more sense to recognize what they have learned and done and think, let's recognize that and harness it. With people is different than with dogs. But even just the simple fact of letting them know that you recognize that, because they learn skills on the streets just same as people, right? Just as people who live through hard situations have learned skills. And that, I think, is really important to people, that autonomy, agency, providing agency, recognizing autonomy, that makes people feel comfortable, instead of just being generic, or that, nope, you're in this situation now and we're telling you what you have to do.
Right.
And dogs are the same. Okay.
Now going back a little bit to the question, because I'm always curious about this. How do dogs understand the grieving process, right? Is it the same? And how how do they process this? You know, how are they processing that emotion? And then is it a long-term thing or is it short-term?
That's a really good question. It also happens when another animal in the home, non-human animal, passes away as well. I think it's interesting the example you gave, because I think that dog was able to process that. And this is just my opinion. It's really hard. It's really hard for us to know this, but it would be a lot like a child that if somebody died, did they just leave me? Did they just go away? Did they just leave? Do they not like me? Is it my fault? Did I do something wrong?
Okay.
You'll see a lot of stories where people just dump their dog on the side of the road and the dog will just sit there assuming that the people are coming back and they just had to go do something. It's the saddest thing in the world.
I've seen that.
Yeah, because they just don't assume that the people are mean. They assume the people are coming back. That is a grieving process that they have to go through. Same as people, where our routines change. Our breakfast routine changes. We're taking out one cereal bowl instead of two. That can be hard.
Right. Yes.
It can be the small little daily things that just, even if the dog goes to a whole new home, sometimes people will do that. They'll move homes to just be able to start fresh and start new and not have these memories so in their face all the time. But again, that's your area of expertise. With dogs, they didn't have the choice. Somebody rehomed the dog. But yeah, they do grieve. They have emotions. I mean, all of this is much more acceptable now that there's sentient beings. There's been a lot of scientific studies that dogs, just actually that little puppy that I just got off the reserve that was just floating around here. When I first got him, I was with somebody else. She came with me to get the dogs, and haven't seen her for maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And he, we go for walks and he sees people on the streets and he doesn't really, he just walks by, he sees them. We have to recognize he lived on a reserve. Reserves are very busy. Lots of people, lots of kids, lots of stuff going on. There's cars driving everywhere. There's stuff, right? He sees stuff. But when he saw that woman, oh my goodness, from my front porch, and she was on the street, he just pulled, he was beelining it to her. He recognized her. So they do have memory, and they do, where did you go and where have you been? I live here now. Why don't you live here with me? Some dogs just think everybody that they know and love should all live together in the same house. It doesn't occur to them that we don't. So they do get sad. They get upset. They grieve. Time, change. Yeah. I mean, I think, anyone who's had an animal knows that they miss you when you just go to work, because they don't understand why you're not taking them, because you take them on walks and you take them to the dog park and you take them to the kids' soccer game. So why wouldn't you be taking them now? They don't understand that we have to do crappy, shitty things like food shop and go to work, right? So
Very true.
They don't. But I mean, dealing with separation anxiety is something I work with all the time. That's a very common one. So sorry, again, I'm kind of rambling, but they do grieve. I think anything with emotions grieves. It's
I think a lot of times people just misunderstand, because we like to assume that animals aren't as smart. I think that's a huge misconception. You just brought that to light, that no, you don't understand. Dogs are very smart, right? You just have to understand, like you said, perception versus reality, and understanding, and giving the dog a choice to make a better choice and things like that. And I love that concept, because it's the same thing that we teach our children,
I was just going to say, we underestimate children as well.
Right. Oh, yeah. When you've been around kids for quite some time, you realize that, one, they're a lot smarter than us. Two, if given a chance, they get us in trouble every time, right? And then they go back because they're children and they laugh at us because they're like, oh, you didn't see what I just did, right? And you're looking at them like, ooh, and and it's funny because I was just talking with a friend of mine. I go, when you have children, you have to remember from when you was a child. And I think it's the saying, be a child with your child, grow up with them, right? And that takes us as human beings back to a time where things were simple, where things were fun, where things were adventurous, where we were curious about the things that we do, but also we have no concept of the jokes that we like to play, right? And it takes us back to a place where we can now begin to enjoy the life that we're in, because it changes our perception of the reality that we live in. Yes, we're still adults. We're still going to do adult things, but this child is giving me the opportunity to refresh, reboot, and recharge and go at life in a way of saying, this is worth it. This is worth it, right? Because when you see a child walking around, when they fall down, bump their head or something, a lot of times if you don't make it a big thing, they just get up and go, ow. And then they go on about their way, right? You know what I'm saying? And if you don't see, children understand fear from the word no. And I think it's the same thing with dogs. Don't do that, right? And because it's the way that we react to it and it's projected on them. Don't do that. So a child will go, over a period of time, they understand that word no means danger, right? Don't do that means, hey, be careful. You now have to develop a sense of fear in your world. Whereas you went from caution, right? Yes, caution. You went from climbing on the monkey bars and doing backwards flips off of fences to going, maybe I shouldn't
that's not such a good idea.
Right. Maybe that's not such a good idea, right? But what's the purpose of not doing it? What's the purpose of having a fence if you can't climb the fence and walk the pole with the possibilities of falling off and hurting yourself? We come from a different generation, right? You know what I'm saying? Because that's the generation I grew up in. Like, hey, there's a 12-foot chain link fence. I wonder if I could walk it from that pole to that pole. So it's a sense of balancing act, right? You know what I'm saying? No fear. If I fall down, the worst thing that it can happen, I break a bone, right? But I can't go home, so I'm gonna have to throw some dirt on it.
Exactly. Right. You know what, though? It's so funny what you're saying, because that is an intrinsic reward.
Yeah.
Kids, and we underestimate kids and dogs and think that they always, because adults need money or they need some kind of value to do things. But kids, it's like what you just said. They're just doing it because they're curious. They're doing it because it feels good, because it's like, right. Ooh, that's so, maybe that's a good decision. Maybe it's a bad decision. Maybe I need to find out what would happen if I did this.
Yeah.
Right? It's just pure. People often say that about their dog. They're like, why would you do that? Or they did it without any reason. No, there's a reason. There's a reason why kids do behavior. There's a reason why dogs. There's a reason why adults. I think people also view dogs a little bit the way they do kids, where it just makes you see the innocence and the fun and simple things. I would also say forgiveness and grace to ourselves and to others. That dogs are very forgiving, and they see us for exactly what we are, which is refreshing, because a lot of adults don't. That's and judgmental, all that's going on. And they make us be honest with ourselves about who we are in a good way.
Yeah.
And children do a lot of that as well.
I love that. I want to add to that so people understand, the problem with adults, the challenge, not the problem, but the challenge with adults when it comes down to looking at children, we're adults. We've lived that life before. You know, we've had the consequences of our actions, right? You know what I'm saying? Whether if they was good or bad, we had the consequences. So in the same sense, when you look at a child, we like to assume that they understand these consequences versus of their actions. Not, we need to switch it around and have the understanding. This is their first time. Everything that we've done, we've seen 1,000 times, in some cases, 1,000,000 times over, right? And sometimes the actions are, well, the consequences are the same. And very rarely it's something different because you're making a different choice depending on the individual, the situation, and how you're going to perceive that reality that you're in. You don't know what's happened between that time and this time, right? You just don't know. So children, and this is why I love being around children, because they make me laugh, but also, you know, they teach me to back up and let them just kind of figure things out for themselves and things like that, right? Because if they go up and touch the stove, even though it may not be hot, they understand food comes out of there. Once they understand that reality, they're like, oh, what is this? Oh, it's shiny, it's smooth. There's a glass. So they get enthralled with the image that they see in the glass, like, oh, they're not paying attention to what's on the inside of it, right? They're paying attention to what they see. Now, if it was hot and they saw the food come out of there and they see you grab it, you have to remember, this is their first time experiencing something like that, right? And they're going, oh, food comes out of there. You're supposed to grab this and then reach in and grab that. They don't understand the concept of mitts. Don't grab it with your bare hands. The first time they go out and they experience snow, they don't have any concept that the snow is cold. They just see the snow. They see,
Yep.
and depending on the situation, they're like, oh, I want to go out there and experience this for the first time. It's not until they get the cold hands to where they're like, maybe, just maybe I wouldn't do that. So letting animals or letting dogs and letting children explore these things. Be curious.
But I also, I mean, I work exclusively, like I said, I have puppies here, but that's with adolescent dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And getting back to what you were saying about people's experiences, we need to recognize those. So as puppies, yes, that's like children. We go through those with that and their experience, and they look in the mirror trying to figure out if that's a different dog or
Right.
if that's them. Should they bark at that dog? Another dog in my house. What? Look how cute that dog is. You know, things like that, right? Those things are so fun to have them experience. But with adolescent dogs, even if I work with a lot of adolescent dogs that have come from good homes. They went to proper puppy training and they got proper socialization and everything else. And due to brain development, that's what's happening in the adolescent stage, is you get brain development where exactly a lot of what you're talking about, there's a difference between a younger child looking at a stove and recognizing food comes out of it, but not putting two and two together that the food is hot, so the stove must be hot. So I got to be careful because the pot's going to be hot because it came out of the stove. These are scientific studies that are done with dogs on the ability to, those are cognitive skills. So they can put two and two together. One is called object permanence. That's a very, so what I'll do is I'll take these scientific studies and research them and then use them to explain dog behavior to pet parents. So, for example, a puppy is chewing a bone that you want to take away from him because you don't, for health reasons, you don't want him to chew the bone for longer than X amount of time. So with a puppy, you could take away the chew bone, throw a treat down the hall, he goes, gets the treat. And in that time period, you put the bone in the cupboard and he comes back and he's totally forgotten that he even had the bone and he has the treat and he's with his treat and laying down, right? A dog, right? A dog is like, no, honey, I know that you want my bone, and I know that you just put it in the cupboard. And they go and they jump on the cupboard that you just put the bone, or they won't go run down the hall and get the treat because they know that you're just going to put the bone in the cupboard. So what worked as a puppy doesn't work as an adolescent.
Right.
Nothing to do with brain development, nothing to do with history, nothing to do with a bad upbringing. It's just that those cognitive skills clicking in and brain development. And it's the same with children. A 3-year-old, we can teach them the concept of sharing. So they understand that sharing means that they take some of their crayons over to their sister. But then when they get to be 4 years old, they're viewing it as a larger concept. They get that it's something that their parents want them to do, that it's accepted, and they get praised, and it makes their parents happy. But they start to question, do I want to share? Do I like sharing? What happens if I don't share? Can I share some of my crayons, not all of my crayons? Do I, so we have to start parenting differently and providing those choices, and or whether it's options at that stage, or decision making, and harnessing that curiosity. And we can't just tell them that it's right to share. We have to work on a larger scale. That's the same with adolescent dogs. And some people will compare their adolescent dog to an adolescent teenager. They know what you're trying to say. They know you're trying to get them to come when called. They know what come when called means. And they just look at you and flip you the bird. they
Understood.
They're just like, yeah, no, you're standing there and you want me to come inside and it's nice out and I don't want to come inside. What are you going to do about it? Right? You need to change the way that you can't just continue to yell at them, and it doesn't work with people, and it doesn't work with dogs. You need to just completely harness different skills, and instead of viewing it as bad behavior, view it as, okay, my dog now has the ability to process and think, and I need to harness that. And it's the same with people when they come from different situations or make decisions we don't like.
I love that. Oh my God. So much right there. Billie, I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. Such a lot of great stuff going on right there. So before I let you go, what do you got going on right these days?
Well,
I've seen some articles. I've seen you write some articles. You've been in the magazine. You've done a lot of great things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love all those opportunities to speak and chat on all different topics. And I'm speaking at conferences and webinars, and a lot of animal welfare groups. Really love all those connections. I am starting a course teaching what I do. Instead of just teaching it to pet parents, I shouldn't say just, because that's important, to help dogs and to help them integrate in and to overcome emotions and grief and that kind of thing. But to teach it to people as an entire methodology from front to back, a full course, so that other professionals who are interested in expanding their knowledge or interested in this type of approach of working with dogs. And I'm working with other animal welfare advocates to create these courses. So if people would like to sign up to my email list, I always send out on my email list. That's on my website. The link to that is Upward Dogology, UPWARD.DOGOLOGY.com, upwarddogology.com, and all the info's on there. So that's kind of my next big project, as well as getting some papers published, and my next book that you and I are going to talk about as well.
Yes.
So my next book, and I still have my podcast, Dog Training Disrupted.
And where can people find that at? Are you on all the platforms, YouTube, all of those things?
Yeah,
Send me those links so I can put them in the description so people know where to find you and everything. Because with the knowledge that you have, I think that's very beneficial for the audience to be able to go back and have something to reference from someone who's, who you're the one who does this, right? You're the beginning.
Yes, I am the only
Right?
person who uses
Yeah,
cognitive behavioral therapy.
you're the only person that does this. So, and I think with the information that you have for those who are struggling with trying to understand their dog, I think that information will be able to help them understand,
Thanks. And
but
I
also help them
for your
maneuver.
audience, just to understand cognitive behavioral therapy as a whole, if you think it's something that might help you or might be of interest in your journey, in your grieving journey, and in just of interest to explore it, even
Mhm.
without it being in relation to canines. I just think it's a beautiful, it's adaptable and flexible. I just really like it. And if anyone wants to chin wag about it, they can reach
Oh
out.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony.
Oh, as always, we've always had great conversation, and what you bring to the table is phenomenal,
Thank you.
right? Amazing, intelligent, very, I mean, and you put it in a way to where people understand it, you know. And that to me is so amazing, and I love talking with you. We definitely have to do this again, and so for
Back
everyone out there, um, her information, I will get her information, put it down in the description. And if you guys are enjoying the conversation that we have, this is the new segment that we're doing of Let's Talk About It Wednesdays on the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am your host. And if you made it this far, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And if you have any questions, comments, please put those in the comment section. Let us know what you think about it. And if you have a topic that you would like to see us talk about or something like that, please let us know. We're doing this every Wednesday. It's one of those things to help explore our knowledge base about the things that we normally wouldn't talk about into the world. I am Tony Lynch. Again, Billie Groom. Thank you for blessing me with this conversation and being on the platform to share your information with us. And for everyone else, stay tuned tomorrow. Stay tuned tomorrow. We got some more great podcast episodes coming up with some amazing people. And until then, you guys keep your head up. Peace.